Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, September 26, 2019. More still happening today. Lots happening here at Kagro in the Morning World headquarters, of course. Well, we got a little miss the bus situation going on here. And, well, all right, that's going to be preoccupying me during today's show. So we'll let Greg, I guess, take the lead in the first hour, as is usually the case, while I fret and worry about my son walking to school. It's not that far. It is, you know, walkable, but it'll take him quite a while. So, oh well, lesson learned. But I'm going to be worried about what's going on. Anyway, perhaps you're worried about what's going on today. The whistleblower report of sorts, at least I think so, is out. People are saying that it's out, but you know how I am with Trump paperwork. Can you be sure that this is the whole whistleblower report, unedited and as originally filed? No. So we'll see whether that story breaks during the day and leads us to believe that we're reading something other than the full whistleblower report. But from all indications, from people giving their initial reactions to it as they read it, it sounds quite damning enough anyway, although, you know, yesterday's Republican exercise was insisting that neither the call memorandum nor the whistleblower's report, for that matter, are really all that big a deal. And what are we all so upset about anyway? So we'll see whether we can straighten that out today. We might actually spend some time reading through the whistleblower's report all by our very selves, because it doesn't sound like it comes out all that well for Trump. But the fact that it's out, I guess, means that they must be gaming things out in the White House with the idea in mind that they can whistle past this somehow, or insist that it's all on the up and up after all. But I've been reading along with people's reactions, and they all sort of started to break too close to the beginning of the show for us to be able to read and digest this thing for ourselves, or even read all the others digesting it. I haven't been able to mark articles. We'll have to collect them along the way. Lots of fun and interesting comments from, say, Ari Berman flying by here to say, this is as bad, if not worse, than Watergate. So that should be fun. So here we go. Daily Co's Radio is live now, we're told, all the way from Portland, Maine, via Bill, who lives up there, and Greg already in and ready to roll. But we're live now. Look, all Kagro X is asking, that's me, David Waldman, is that when Trump finally flees the country, he does it on a weekday between the hours of 9 and 11 a.m. Get on it, Judiciary Committee. That's what I'm looking for. I want to make sure that things happen during the show, and I guess wish granted, at least this particular wish so far. They released the maybe whistleblower's report right during the show. Good morning, Greg. Are you reading?
Hey, good morning, I am. So this is what we amateurs call a smoking gun.
Oh, all right.
And the other way to put that is Jared probably advised Trump to go ahead and release it. You know, what could go wrong?
Why not? People want transparency, eh?
But this is big, this is serious, and let's give you an idea. Jump right into it. August 12th, 2019 says the cover letter.
Okay.
It's directed to the Honorable Richard Burr, Chairman Select Committee on Intelligence.
That guy's already a traitor.
Honorable Adam Schiff, Chairman, Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. So one's a Select Committee, the other's a Permanent Select Committee.
Right.
We'll skip over that for the moment.
Okay.
Dear Chairman, Chairman Byrd, Chairman Schiff, I'm reporting an urgent concern, that's in scare quotes, and God, it should be, in accordance with the procedures outlined in, and then they outlined the reg, unusual lawyerese with the funny squiggle, a number, some letters, parentheses. This letter is unclassified when separated from the attachment, so we don't have the attachment. So your original point is correct. It's almost the letter, but not exactly the letter. In the course of my official duties, I have received information from multiple U.S. government officials that the President of the United States is using the power of his office to solicit interference from a foreign country in the 2020 U.S. election.
Is that coming? Are we having one of those?
This interference includes, among other things, pressuring a foreign country to investigate one of the president's main domestic political rivals. The president's personal lawyer, Mr. Rudolph Giuliani, is a central figure in this effort. Attorney General Barr appears to be involved as well.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay. Over the past 4 months, more than half a dozen U.S. officials have informed me of various facts related to this effort. The information provided herein was relayed to me in the course of official interagency business. It's routine for U.S. officials with responsibility for a particular regional or functional portfolio to share such information with one another in order to inform policy making and analysis. I was not a direct witness to most of the events described. That's the one line that Republicans were using.
Yeah.
But they left out the rest. However, I found my colleagues' accounts of these events to be credible because in almost all cases, multiple officials recounted fact patterns that were consistent with one another. In addition, a variety of information consistent with these private accounts has been reported publicly. I am deeply concerned that the actions described below constitute a serious or flagrant problem, abuse, or violation of law or executive order that does not include differences of opinions concerning public policy matters consistent with the definition of urgent concern, and then again cites the reg. I am therefore fulfilling my duty to report this information through proper legal channels to the relevant authorities. I'm also concerned these actions pose risks to U.S. national security and undermine the U.S. government's efforts to deter and counter foreign interference in U.S. elections.
Okay.
And then goes on to say, I think it's unclassified if I don't list stuff. Then he lists the presidential phone call on July 25, which is the issue here.
That's the one we heard about.
Okay, but let me just quote. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but let me quote this part. Multiple White House officials with direct knowledge of the call informed me that after an initial exchange of pleasantries, the president used the remainder of the call to advance his personal interests. Namely, he sought to pressure the Ukrainian leader to take action to help the president's 2020 re-election bid. According to the White House officials who had direct knowledge of the call, the president pressured Mr. Zelensky, that's two Y's at the end, by the way, that's not a misspell, to, inter alia, initiate or continue an investigation into the activities of former Vice President Joseph Biden and his son Hunter, assist in purportedly uncovering allegations of Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election originating in Ukraine, with a specific request that the Ukrainian leader locate and turn over servers used by the DNC and examined by U.S. cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike, which initially reported Russian hackers had penetrated the DNC network in 2016, and meet or speak with two people the president named explicitly as his personal envoys on these matters, Mr. Giuliani and Attorney General Barr, to whom the president referred multiple times in tandem. And then there's some footnotes. Now, here's the part that starts to get, okay, well, that just sounds like stuff we knew. Yes. The White House officials who told me this information were deeply disturbed by what had transpired in the phone call. They told me there was already a discussion ongoing with White House lawyers about how to treat the call because of the likelihood in the officials' retelling that they had witnessed the president abuse his office for personal gain. Ukraine acknowledged it first, he says, but based on my understanding, there were approximately a dozen White House officials who listened to the call. The officials I spoke with told me that participation in the call had not been restricted in advance because everybody expected it would be a routine call.
Well, it was in a way.
Okay. So basically it's setting up, yeah, he did it. But here's where the cover-up is worse than the crime.
Oh, well.
Efforts to restrict access to records related to the call. In the days following the phone call, I learned from multiple U.S. officials that senior White House officials had intervened to lock down all records of the phone call, especially the official word-for-word transcript, the thing that was released yesterday, of the call that was produced, as is customary, by the White House Situation Room. This set of actions underscored to me that White House officials understood the gravity of what had transpired in the call. White House officials told me they were directed by White House lawyers to remove the electronic transcript from the computer system in which such transcripts are typically stored. Instead, the transcript was loaded into a separate electronic system that's otherwise used to store and handle classified information of an especially sensitive nature. One White House official described this act as an abuse of the electronic system because the call did not contain anything remotely sensitive from a national security perspective.
So using the classification system not to protect national security, but to protect the president personally from criminal liability.
Right. And then he goes into all the details of exactly what happened. And then has some supplements. But basically what he's saying here is that, look, I have really great contacts here within my business, and it's important for us to share information. And the information being shared is that Trump pressured the Ukrainian president to investigate Biden. It was Giuliani and Barr who was assigned to be the bagmen. And after realizing that this was on the phone call and a whole bunch of people must have heard it, they tampered with the transcript and tried to hide it from people.
Yes.
In other words, he did it.
Well, that's kind of what I thought.
That's, pretty much as close to a smoking gun as you can get.
I guess so. There's some people testifying before committees today, so that's
starting right now.
Things up. See, I told everybody to do it between 9 and 11, but I was kidding.
Acting DNI arrives for House Intel Committee hearing. He just got in there. It's going to be awfully interesting.
Yeah. And
so I'm seeing even some of the conservative commentators are tweeting this around, basically with comments like, "This is really bad."
Yeah. It's like a movie.
Yeah.
Except it really happened. And, well, I guess it shouldn't surprise anybody that it's like like some sort of thriller movie because, I mean, Trump lives his life that way. Things he sees on TV or in the movies, or most likely movies that he sees on TV, and he conducts himself that way. Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you're going to be totally focused.
No.
And, be what we, remember, you and I finally like to call S kind of people.
Oh, yes, right, okay.
The list people,
not
the people who have to spell it out bit by bit by bit by bit. This is what you get. The N people, the ones who say, oh my gosh, this suggests a bigger picture. Greg Miller. The complaint, citing multiple U.S. officials, alleges the White House lawyers have been stuffing politically troubling records of presidential calls into highly classified storage to hide them from scrutiny throughout the Trump presidency.
Yeah.
This just got much bigger.
Yeah. What else
How do we know
there?
it was just this call? How do we know what other calls? What about the Putin calls? What's on there? Where are they? Do they keep records of this? Do they keep separate? Are they keeping two sets of books? Like a crooked restaurant? I mean, what's going on here?
Saw that in the movies, too.
Yeah.
And we got your accountant, sir. So, okay. I think we got you now. We're going to decode the books.
So as Robert George puts it, technology updates the scandal. White House tapes exposed a Watergate cover-up, but looks like a dual computer network.
Yeah.
That'll be the buzz phrase for L'Affaire Ukraine.
Right. And we should look, by the way, in the place where it was originally stored, because I imagine there are traces of it there as well. Unless, of course, the hard drive's been bleached. Dun, dun, dun. But, yeah, it doesn't matter because we'll actually have the transcript.
Russia, if you're listening, I'd like your end of the call, please.
Yeah, right.
I mean, this is just amazing jaw-dropping stuff. My jaw is still on the floor. I can't believe they did this. I can't believe it's all written down like this. I can't believe that they thought that if this were released, it'd be okay.
Yes, right. The Wire.gif over here. Are you taking notes on a criminal conspiracy? That's not the way it was actually delivered. Of course.
But okay. Yeah. So anyway, your reaction, sir.
Well, I imagine that Trump flees the country before the show is over. So I guess there's that possibility. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. This wraps up so many loose threads that we've been talking about, not just about Trump, but about, well, really the way Republicans handle the country and national security and have for a while. And I assume that there are probably, if you dig enough with enough knowledge from this roadmap, you'll probably find some democratic violations in the past as well. But
sir, may I ask you, do you have any reaction to the Department of Justice based on this report I read to you in regard to their handling of the Mueller report or anything else?
Yes. Arrest the Attorney General.
I mean, this guy's worse than John Mitchell.
Yeah,
I didn't think that was possible.
I don't know. I thought we all had an inkling that he had been brought in specifically for this purpose as the cleanup guy. He's the what is it from the other another movie reference, Mr. Wolf of the from when they use him in Pulp Fiction, the fixer, the guy who comes and cleans up the crime scenes.
Yeah.
That was his role from the beginning. I guess peripherally, once we're done with the serious work here, we ought to make notes to go back. I said there were Democrats we could shake up about this. This wasn't what I meant, but there are going to be some liberal-leaning commentators who should be called out on the carpet after this is all said and done to apologize for vouching for Barr during his nomination. Don't forget them, but don't spend your time on them now. We'll use the radio show to do that. Everyone else is reacting to what's in the whistleblower report. I have had to have it read to me, so we'll use it to our advantage and say we'll take care of what's going on around the peripheries. But the other loose thread in all of this is what it's demonstrating is a use of the national security classified information, the classification system, not to protect national security, but in fact to cover up embarrassing mistakes, which is something that everybody has believed. Presidents, maybe of both parties, I don't know, but the national security state has used for a long time improperly. And the big fear really was that apparatus would one day fall into the hands of somebody who was using it not to cover up embarrassing but poor political decisions, but criminal, self-interested theft and abuse of office. And now we have it. And magically, Donald Trump is the guy who delivers that to us. What a surprise.
Right. Now, what I have is basically, it looks like screen captures of this PDF. So I don't have the PDF itself, meaning that, it's really hard to search it. You can't search pictures.
Yeah.
I'm trying to scan it and see where Mike Pence is mentioned, in other words, in this document. And I'm just doing a quick scan, and it's a little tough to find. But, it raises the question, since Mike Pence, I think, also was peripherally involved in this, too, in regard to, conveying messages.
Yeah.
So the question is, who isn't involved?
Really?
I mean, certainly at the top of the list is Rudy Giuliani and Bill Barr, who ought to resign this morning.
Rudy Giuliani, except he doesn't have a job.
Not Rudy doesn't have a job. I'm talking about Bill Barr.
Yeah. Well, I almost hope he doesn't, so that we can impeach him.
How can anybody have any faith whatsoever in him actually doing his job after this? I don't get it.
No, I don't either. By the way, I'll make a suggestion. Another of the stories coming out, the peripheral issues from yesterday and today. Yesterday, Mike Stark brought up the issue of the Democrats thinking, the best way to do this is to strike while the iron is hot, move with a very limited impeachment investigation
that's a big
focused
debate
only
right
on
now.
Ukraine. Yes, it is. Now I actually understand what was going on with that, and Joan helped explain it to me. And that becomes an issue again this morning. I would make this suggestion.
What was going on?
Well, the strategizing is just that. Do we strike while the iron is hot on something very narrowly focused that everybody agrees?
Narrow is also fast, so they go together.
Right.
In other words, do you want to do a narrow thing that we can get quickly done before January, or do we want to include everything but take our time and be deliberate?
Right. And the answer is do both. It's a hybrid response, I would say, with this. If you really are interested in moving super quick, I would say impeach Barr very quickly with this and hold open the possibility that the president will also be impeached on this subject. 2, they should keep in mind that there is no limitation on the number of counts or the number of times or the number of resolutions you can pass impeaching the president. In fact, there's really no even any limit on how many times you can bring the same charges. Even if he's acquitted, you can bring him again as a technical point. I don't know that anybody would think that would be a politically feasible thing to do. But you can move quickly, and you can strike on this issue. Let me throw something else in there, too,
because it's important to the discussion, I think,
right.
And that is Robert Costa, and other reporters are saying, and Mike Murphy started this off by saying, well, I know 30 Republican senators who would vote to impeach if they could do it in a secret vote.
Yes. Well,
they're reporting that if you make it narrow and you make it about Ukraine, you will get Republican votes.
Yeah, well, that's the thinking. Of course,
after this,
the magic of getting Republican
I think that's
votes.
probably true.
Yeah, it may be. But it also might not. I mean, we've been through this situation a number of times.
Yeah, but that's why the really, I can't believe they're not going further comments by Sass and Romney that we cited yesterday turn out to be so important.
Yeah.
Because there are people who are thinking that way. They can't bring themselves to say it, but they're coming close.
There are people who are saying things like that, and what they do with their vote.
Yeah, no
may be
guarantee
another question.
I get all of that, but that's part of the thinking.
Well, so I think the thinking there is if we move very quickly, it will be that much more difficult for people who said these things to change their minds and vote the other way, if they were ever of this mind and it wasn't just a ruse.
Right.
And I agree that that's a serious consideration. It just shouldn't be billed as, or you should leave yourself with enough wiggle room to say, we're absolutely considering moving very quickly on an impeachment resolution narrowly focused on Ukraine. And then if there were a follow-up question, if there isn't, leave it at that. If there's a follow-up question, well, is that it? Are you not going to discuss emoluments or Russia or any of those things? Oh, I'm not addressing those. I'm just saying one of the things that's going to happen is a very quick move on something focused very narrowly on Ukraine. Right. And that's that. And what happens after that is anybody's guess. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. And my position on this, I'm not taking a strong position that it has to be fast and focused. What I'm saying is I've seen people say, no, it has to be wide and deep because look at all the stuff he did. Mm-hmm. And anybody who thinks that narrow and fast should be done is stupid and that's bad and you're wrong. Okay. And it's not even a serious suggestion. Actually, it is a serious suggestion. I don't know which side has the better argument because they're both really strong. But the fact of the matter is there are some reasons at least to consider doing fast and narrow.
Yeah, I would think that I'm open to considering that possibility, absolutely. And the way I would handle it, and I guess the thing to look out for in trying to decide who's stupid in all this is, read very closely what people are saying. If they are saying, we're going to take it, it's a one-shot thing, and if it succeeds, it succeeds, and if it doesn't, we're finished and we won't try again with anything, or we won't continue the investigations. That sounds like a foolish thing to do. But
right.
Yeah, I would make the argument that there's a possibility for a quick, narrow, focused strike, so long as I was going to say, so long as your rhetoric, leaves open the possibility that you're going to look at some other possibilities as well and continue with the investigations. But you know what? So what? Let me put this out there. Suppose you're the rhetoric is apparently for me because I need to be reassured in all this, and I guess I ultimately don't. Quite honestly, if your rhetoric implies that this is it and it's the only thing, and then you later change your mind and come forward with other allegations and other impeachment resolutions, and people will say, "But you said." You know what I'll say? Oh no, they might have misled you.
Circumstances change. Yeah, the fact of the matter is that the public has a very short attention span. And again, you'll remember one of the arguments for why now and not before is because now we finally have an issue that the public can understand. And I'm not saying making excuses for Nancy Pelosi. I'm saying why those 7 moderate, writers of the op-ed that was in the Washington Post decided to change. In fact, there's a story in Time magazine by Molly Ball about how Trump triggered, everybody to change their mind. I'm pretty sure she starts off with Abigail Spanberger and how she got there, because that's like your favorite congressperson. But
she's in everything.
She's in everything. But the point is that how we got here is at this particular point in time less important than where we are, and the public's attention span is very short. And one of the things that happened to change everybody's mind is that this is intelligible. This is like a short memo laying out he did it, and then he tried to cover it up. Everybody can understand that. Yeah. This is Watergate for kids who didn't go through it. It's there. This is a smoking gun. We can use the same language. Do this. This we can do because the public has a very short attention span, and this is defensible. You can't say, oh, well, it says right there that he wasn't privy to the whole thing. Well, but it's all laid out in detail what that thing was and that they tried to cover it up. You don't have to take his word for it. Do an investigation. That's what impeachment is. It's a process. Interview those people. If you find out that he's right, you can't use the line that he didn't look at it directly or he didn't see it directly and he's doing hearsay. That's how it works. And so do this, do thou. Everybody understands it.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably the best argument for a swift and focused strike. Of course, as I have used the last couple of days to point out, and will continue along the periphery, depending on, it will be either central or peripheral, depending on how this trajectory develops. But yeah, it's not a separate story from Russia. It's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
And you should expect that even a narrow and focused and swift investigation, now that you're getting into things like, yes, the president orders his people to move or tamper with evidence in order to cover this stuff up, you can say, all right, well, once we establish that, then we can say in the next round of investigation, what else has been hidden? And voila, it is Russia. What do you know? Amazing.
Well, listen, now that you've read the Silmarillion and the Hobbit, maybe you'll understand the Lord of the Rings better. Here we have this really complicated thing going on with the Mueller report, which is really tough to explain. Let's do this, okay? Let me give you another example. Let's do Ukraine. This is what happens. This is how it works. This is how Trump uses his people. This is how he does it. Now that you understand that, let's go back and look at Russia.
Yeah.
Only with that understanding.
Right. Read it again, having understood. Remember
let's investigate it.
Yeah. And last
maybe
time
we'll find something to impeach there too.
Entirely possible, right? Oh, the problem with the Mueller report is there's no smoking gun. Well, now we know where they hide their smoking guns.
Yeah. Were there other calls that were made during this time frame? No, because he wasn't president yet. It's a little different. He's president here.
Which is what makes it worse, of course. We'll be back in 2. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on it. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I just have received the report that the P-tape is real, so that's good. We'll get to that later on. But they are hiding it in a different server. Oh, by the way, can I I should point out to everybody that moving the document from one file system to another electronically, it occurs to me, are they like strategically avoiding using the word server in all this? Because that would be the biggest irony of all, is that they're hiding the evidence of their crime by whitewashing, bleaching, what have you, destroying their server and moving it from another server, one server to another server, and even the server even came up in pressuring Ukraine and all this. And yes, and by the way, I guess the final word on what he was asking about or demanding information about in the very narrow, limited universe of this one call, which again, as everyone just keeps reminding us, is only one part of the whistleblower complaint. It must have been really interesting on the Ukrainian side of the call. They don't appear to have any clue what the hell he's talking about, and the reason is because the story Trump is telling is Alex Jones level, Q conspiracy level nonsense that has nothing to do with anything. Oh, one part of his request, this the questions about the server, and I heard Ukraine had it. Nobody thinks Ukraine has it except Rudy Giuliani. And if you needed any more evidence that the president is that susceptible to BS, that whatever he sees on television is what he really believes, and how dangerous that is. That's your answer right there. That literally has not been reported by even anybody else on Fox News. Nobody thinks that.
So Yamiche Alcindor is tweeting about the hearing, which I'm not watching or listening to because I'm talking to you. And she says Representative Adam Schiff begins the hearing by noting the historic nature of today and talking about the nation's founding principles. He then says the whistleblower complaint is the most graphic evidence yet that President Trump has betrayed his oath of office and the U.S. Constitution. After what I read, I can see why he would say that. Schiff, like many Democrats, says the complaint reads like a classic mafia shakedown. He adds nothing Trump says on the calls in America's interests, and that his behavior is a possible remedy. Impeachment.
Yeah. Well, that's a good one. Let's see. I should spend some time rounding up references to all the reactions we've got. So far, I guess the one that was most revealing, but then again, it came from Ben Sass, so maybe it's not revealing, was I guess he came out from reading the whistleblower report in the secure facility inside of the Capitol complex. And I guess everybody expected him to do the regular Republican thing and say, man, not so bad. Where's the quid pro quo? And instead he came out and said, essentially, this is going to occupy some time and worry a lot of people, and we're not done here.
Yeah, he said something along the lines of, I wouldn't be circling the wagon so quick.
Yeah. I mean,
which is a pretty good comment. So Donald Trump says, right. and this is all in caps, remember, not that he's worried or anything.
Oh.
The Democrats are trying to destroy the Republican Party and all that it stands for, which, if this is what it stands for, that's true. Yeah. Stick together, play their game, fight hard, Republicans. Our country is at stake. I think he's worried a little bit. Now he's begging for GOP support, Eric Bollard says. And this was an couple of interesting comments. Simon Rosenberg says calls for Boris to resign immediately should be the loudest sounds in Washington today. That's what I say. And Nancy Letourneau points out something you had just mentioned. It's important to keep in mind that this lie about Biden and Ukraine was cooked up by Steve Bannon's pal Peter Schweitzer in his book Secret Empires. It's a repeat of what they did with Clinton cash. So that's the Alex Jones conspiracy source for all of this stuff. Trump reads it and says, this is great. And why aren't you following up on this incredible book, which is footnoted and belongs in, the Smithsonian? Right next to the U.S. Constitution.
Yes, right, of course. That's again at the heart of the danger of having this kind of an idiot as president.
I don't think it's fair to call him an idiot. He's a lunatic.
Okay. All right. But I think he started as an idiot, and then he slowly became a lunatic.
And he lost it, right?
Yeah. I mean, he may have lost it before he was elected, but
as Dan Pfeiffer adds, the odds are approximately zero that the Giuliani-Ukraine fiasco is the only time Trump and his team have corrupted the policy process for political and personal gain. So if I were the impeachment hearing folks, I might want to talk to the folks who are responsible for archiving these calls and see if there are any others that got the same treatment, right?
Yes.
I mean, because how do we know it was only this one?
We don't. I don't know how you're going to track that down, but I guess talking to the
somebody had to do. Somebody's responsible. Yeah. Call the IT people.
Yeah, I guess that's
true. Call the help desk.
Not CrowdStrike, though, because they're, I don't know what, Ukrainian
just call,
spies.
Excuse me, is this a White House help desk? I have a question here. Can you help me with this? I'm trying to figure out how many times the president has actually, moved a proper transcript onto one of those secure things. I just can't. I'm looking for it. I had it here a minute ago, and I just can't find the number. Could you help me with that? What is it, 4, 9, 17? You guys would know that.
Figure that out for me.
It's the help desk. They're there to help you. They're going to answer your question.
Are they really, though?
Well, they're the help desk.
Nobody
told me I wasn't supposed to talk to that guy. I'm the help desk. I'm supposed to help.
Yes, right. Well, I hope that they will. Quick reminder also for listeners who've heard this subject addressed before. Yes, there will be calls for Barr's resignation. A reminder, you can absolutely still impeach Barr even if he resigns. Even if he resigns in order to avoid impeachment, you can do it. Do you want to? Yes, because you can use the penalty phase to bar him from future federal service. And Barr is a recidivist. He has been back and in and out of government several times over several decades, and I guess we know he's never been an honest player at any point.
I was doing something else,
ever.
and I only heard it from the back of the room yesterday. But I had Rachel Maddow on, and she was telling this really interesting story about the last days of Spiro Agnew.
Yes.
Where he knew that there was a federal indictment closing in on him for things that he did. I forget what, extortion and a whole bunch of other stuff. And in order to try to fend it off, he basically begged Carl Albert in the House of Representatives to impeach him.
Oh, really?
Because he figured that the impeachment process might preclude the legal process.
Oh, no.
And the Carl Albert and the House Democrats said, no, we'll pass on this one.
Right, and not that it would have worked anyway.
And then he had a plea bargain and resign and all that stuff.
Yes.
No, but he was
that's too
desperate.
bad.
I mean, the point is that when you realize that the walls are closing in on you, and again, for those who don't remember, Spiro Agnew was the biggest loudmouth, chest beater, Jim Jordan style Republican of the time, way more than Richard Nixon. Right? Tricky Dick was sneaky, but Spiro Agnew was the chest pounding Jim Jordan sort of Republican. So for him to beg and then, get his comeuppance as the walls close in on him, the point is that when the pressure starts to mount, people do really funky things that you think are out of character.
Yes. Well, good. I'd be curious to see from an academic perspective what those funky things are for someone like Donald Trump.
Yes, exactly.
So let's wacko to begin with.
Yeah,
it's going to be interesting to
But you
watch.
saw a little bit of it. I mean, when he was doing his press conference, try to blow smoke thing yesterday, incredibly subdued. It looked like one of his rally speeches without the crowd, with no energy.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people thought he might have been medicated in some way, but I just think he was...
I mean, the Adderall wore off and he ran out of dopamine, that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, okay, so the reverse. Some people were just chattering on Twitter.
But
I think he's been
it was
sedated,
a really odd look for him.
It may just be that he's run out of amphetamines here. So
I'm just saying, I think in some way, shape, or form, and it would be irresponsible not to speculate, that the pressure's getting to him, and that is indeed something to watch.
I hope so. So today
Look at his tweets this morning. Oh my God! You have to save me. They're coming for me.
So he escaped in the limousine. I guess he stayed the night at Trump Tower, like Zelensky, apparently. I was confused by that in the memo about the call where he mentions the emoluments problem and says, when I came to the United States, I stayed at Trump Tower. But I think others have suggested that he might have meant the Trump World Tower near the UN, which has a hotel component to it. Unless he Airbnb'd himself a condo in Trump Tower proper, I don't know what he's talking about. Or it may have just been, you've never been to the United States, but please tell him you have been and you've stayed on his property. That might have been his prep for the call more than anything else. I don't know. Just a small detail that was extractable from that. I'm not even sure where to go for the rest of the day, except to make a survey of the reactions, dive into a couple of the stories. Yeah, all right.
Whistleblower claimed Trump abused his office and that White House officials tried to cover it up. Whistleblower,
That's
Trump
clear.
used power to solicit interference. Whistleblower says White House sought to lock down call records. I don't think these are necessarily the headlines that Trump was hoping for.
They don't say he's handsome or anything.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I think I'll leave that there and leave you. And there's a lot to look at and there's a lot to monitor. I'm actually going to go watch some of this hearing.
Yes, okay.
But, I'm finishing at my, quote, usual time, end quote, so I'm not running out on you. But there's a lot going on, and I think this is kind of a really important day.
Okay, I think so, too. You should go and take a look, and if anything happens, send
I'll
a
get
note.
back to you, or I'll send you signals.
I mean, if it's really amazing, call again. What the hell?
I could always do that.
Yeah. And maybe I get a call from my son when he arrives at school, too.
Yeah, exactly right.
Important
Alrighty,
news
take
there,
care.
too.
Good luck.
All right, thank you.
I feel like we've set up your listening audience for what's happening here, and none of this should come as a shock and a surprise.
Well, yeah, that's my guess.
And I think there's a ton to talk about in terms of what is the proper way to proceed from here? Fast, slow, narrow, wide. What is the process that happens now? It's in 6 committees. How does that work? But the bigger overarching picture is he did it, and this is a smoking gun, and let's move from there. Alrighty, take care, and I will talk to you on Monday, unless something incredible happens tomorrow.
Yeah, or someone resigns today, or something somebody punches somebody during the hearing. Call about that.
Or Boris Johnson quits.
Yeah, right. Remember that guy? This whole United Kingdom thing.
Well, a lot happened yesterday. He went back to the United Kingdom and made a total ass of himself and insulted a lot of Parliament, a lot of the House of Commons, and brought up Joe Cox, who actually was killed by a nutter, if you recall, who was kind of a racist guy, and Parliament was trying to get Boris Johnson to tone down his angry language about calling this the surrender law that's going to make him leave Brexit with a plan. In other words, he just wanted to leave, and Parliament passed this law saying, no, you have to try to negotiate. That's why he closed Parliament down, try to avoid that. They got it in there anyway, and then it turned out closing Parliament down was wrong because he lied to the Queen about why. And then he comes back and angry and yelling and blustering and saying, I don't have to, look, the people want us to do this, and you people don't represent the people. And what you're suggesting is a surrender law. And people brought up Joe Cox and said, listen, she was killed over language like that. Stop doing that. And he wouldn't stop. And he stormed out of Parliament yesterday. That's what happened. And so they were kind of upset about that. And they would really like him to tone it down and are trying to figure out how to do this. And so that's today's story from across the pond.
Okay. Well, we'll catch up with that one. And something Israel as well.
Well, Netanyahu was asked to form the government, and he doesn't have enough votes to do it. And so he's got some time, so this is going to play out over time. He's got a month. But he's not going to be able to find the votes. And then Benny Gantz is going to be asked to do it, and it's unclear how he'll find the votes unless Likud rebels, and that's not clear that's going to happen. And so Netanyahu may then say, okay, nobody could do it. Let's do a third election, which nobody wants. And so we'll see how that plays out. There's your capsule summary.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's I'm glad you did it quick and narrow. It turns out to have been very strategic.
Yep. All righty, take care. I'm going to go watch me some hearings.
All right, you do that, and let us know if anything happens.
Yep, bye.
Bye. Okay, now what? So, I mean, at this point, I mean, my inclination is to simply sit here and watch Twitter, but you can do that on your own. That's no value added. If I just read you what's happening on Twitter, you're probably doing that yourself anyway. So, let's see. Trying to decide, I mean, I think at this point, perhaps not the most valuable thing to simply sit and read the whistleblower report. Well, that may yet end up being what's happening if we roam through the headlines and other things that I've put aside and finally just in reading bits and pieces about things from the periphery say, I just have to read the source document. Well, we may end up doing that. I have read the full document that was released as the call memo yesterday, but I think that was pretty well dissected even by the end of showtime yesterday, and that's almost old news at this point. Let's see, I guess I'll bring up this side subject, is that once again the New York Times appears determined to be as pro-Trump as possible in its, peripheral coverage of the politics of the situation. New York Times coming out yesterday with a story that I guess they ran under the headline of, with the promotion that they had talked to they had talked once again to swing voters around the country, and guess what? They're still sticking with Trump, and they are alienated by the idea of impeachment. And it was ludicrous how they presented this information, and ludicrous how they presented it in public on Twitter. And as a matter of fact, I had grabbed the thread from Matt McDermott, a pollster with Whitman Insight Strategies. And, look, a blue checkmark kind of person as well, and who follows me as well. I didn't even realize that was the case. Well, anyway, I'm now reading his thread, taking apart the assertion on the part of the New York Times that they spoke to swing voters for this article. In fact, they didn't. Long story short here is that they spoke to dedicated Trump activists and fanatics and told people that they were swing voters, and voila, guess what? They have the mind-bending reality, as it turns out in all of this, according to the New York Times, is that the swing voters that, and you know the term is supposed to strike fear in your heart as a Democrat and make you believe that these are the people from whom you have to take your political cues if you want any hope of winning the presidency. But that's an old and outdated definition of the term, and it was never entirely accurate to begin with. And we're learning so much from Rachel Bitecofer in the last couple months and from Greg's explanation of her theories that swing voters aren't even the same people necessarily from one election to the next. So we have this wrong idea of who swing voters are, and what's worse is that the New York Times is appropriating the term swing voters and just slapping the label onto people who are absolutely not swing. They couldn't be swung in an election no matter what happened. And to call those guys swing voters is it's deliberately misleading, obviously, and it's like sabotaging the system by which our election strategists, some of whom may suck and need replacement anyway, are making important decisions about how to approach the elections in order to sort of save the country for the future. So it's kind of important. But more than that, this is something that they've done several times before. And more than that, this is even something that they know they've done several times before because they keep going back to the exact same people. It's not just that they're interviewing Trump supporters and calling them swing voters. It's that they are interviewing people who have been interviewed by the New York Times and other media outlets before, and who in some cases have identified very clearly as Trump fanatics. In other cases, they didn't identify themselves as Trump fanatics in so many words, but their actions in describing what kind of person they are in the previous articles, it became clear that they were Trump fanatics. But that the New York Times has done this several times before, and that this was entirely predictable, not only predictable, but predicted. Several people tweeted yesterday, before this article came out, that any day now the New York Times would be talking to quote-unquote swing voters around the country who turned out to be Trump activists, and they'll all say, Trump is totally right and awesome in all of this, and we don't care, and impeachment makes us even more Trumpy, which is not even possible. Anyway, Matt McDermott pointing this out, and I'll read you his tweet stream, but before I do, I'll point out that the tweets from the New York Times reporters who wrote the article and who are tweeting it out and promoting it are no longer available. In other words, the tweets were deleted. And as a matter of fact, the Twitter account of, I don't even know who this reporter is, and so I can't make it out from the Twitter handle, but, I'm not up on these things. And I never follow those kinds of names. But she went and deleted her Twitter account, which is what people jokingly say, delete your account when you're busted having published the same damn article over and over. And this is exactly it. It's this particular reporter, name not at my fingertips. If you can provide it for me, let me know. But she has several times in the past done exactly the same thing, and that's why everybody knew it was going to be happening again. And it did, and I guess she got the delete your account tweets and did, in fact, delete her account. I don't know whether that means everything's fine at the New York Times, but she's deleted her account, whether at their instruction or her own, or maybe she's fired for all I know. I mean, it really, at some point, rises to the level of a fireable offense. This is fabulism gone berserk, and with serious implications for the future of the country. Someone ought to get their head handed to them for this. Okay. By the way, one suggestion from our friend who always makes me, I don't know, is it cringe or laugh, having to read out okay, here comes some advice from left-leaning cock, just putting it out there. That's the Twitter handle, saying don't discount your value added from being our Twitter concierge. For those of us doing data entry work, you let us look busy while keeping up with a historic day. That's a good point. As a matter of fact, maybe I'll comment on something else along those lines a little. I guess I better do it now or I'll forget. Not that I won't now remember what to go back to after I'm done. But I did happen to see, I guess there is value to that. That's true. And also there was a Twitter comment yesterday from, I guess, is it the editor-in-chief of ProPublica, pointing out an interesting thing here. Let me sort of scroll back and see if I can't find this. And maybe I ought to be reading more of my own Twitter feed as well, just to remind myself of what I thought was important yesterday. Here we are. Steven Engelberg, who tweets as the editor-in-chief of ProPublica. And by the way, this is a person tweeting without a blue check mark. How could that be possible? As the editor, maybe he's not. Maybe he's an imposter. I guess that's what the check mark is supposed to tip me off to. But I think I have no reason to believe that it isn't the editor-in-chief of ProPublica or that it's a parody account. But if they don't have a blue check mark for the editor-in-chief in ProPublica, I don't know what this is all about. But anyway, I don't know why they have check marks at all, if not to verify these kind of folks. I have noticed that they are very media heavy and all that, and people who are media figures, whether celebrities or people in media, they tend to want to give those check marks out to try and help bolster their credibility. Of course, I guess there's still some question about how dedicated social media platforms really are to helping us straighten these things out. But anyway, Steven Engelberg purports to be the editor-in-chief of ProPublica, a former New York Times investigative chief as well, who tweeted as the editor-in-chief of ProPublica, I'm always telling reporters to read their work out loud. What an interesting thing to do. As an experiment, I tried that with today's rough transcript of President Trump's phone call with President Zelensky of Ukraine. The results are illuminating. Now, that's a very specific reference, of course, to this one rough transcript, as he calls it. It's always illuminating to read President Trump's transcripts aloud because you realize how disjointed his thinking is and sometimes how similar it is to my own. Don't make me president. Anyway, more to the point, though, I think this is an interesting idea. I assume that he asks or tells his reporters to read their work out loud, not because they'll come away thinking that they are addled and stupid like the president, but that you need to hear how it sounds in the minds of others, for one thing, and that it will also probably spark thoughts along the way about either what's missing or what might make good additional commentary to what you've done here. And it occurred to me to tweet out, along with that comment from Steven Engelberg, I do a whole podcast 5 days a week on this premise. And by the way, I allowed myself this to say, and it's good and people should listen to it. That was a rare achievement for me to be able to say something like that about myself. But I think that there's value in that. I think that every once in a while when I worry, is there really any value added in reading these articles out loud? I think I'm now become comfortable with the idea that the value added is, what does it make me think of? What does it make you think of? What other things can we relate to it? What other stories can we use to fill in between the lines? And I guess I would recommend that. I think that's a great idea for Steven Engelberg to ask his reporters to do that. And if they don't want to, I will do that. They can outsource it to me and sponsor the show, and I will read their articles out loud to them and tell them what's wrong with them. Okay. You're crazy. That's what's wrong with you. Okay. Where were we? Yes, Matt McDermott, who was talking about this article with the so-called swing voters, has this to say about it. No, the New York Times did not talk to 6, quote, swing voters about impeachment. The article quotes a handful of devout GOP voters who the New York Times has repeatedly interviewed multiple times. That's the most important part about it. And he has a thread that he puts together beginning here. The New York Times article includes an interview with Donna, good old grassroots Donna, presented as a swing voter who doesn't favor impeachment. The problem? New York Times interviewed the same woman last year. How do we even know? Well, they get her last name in there as well. She voted for Trump and the Republicans again in the midterm. This isn't a swing voter. He includes a screen grab or two with the interview with Donna, and I guess we can use that to run up to our 1-minute break. Mr. Dickerson and other supporters said they had stuck with Mr. Trump during the special counsel investigation of Russian election meddling and collusion, throughout revelations about hush money payments to an adult film star, and even during the release of Mr. Trump's vulgar comments on the Access Hollywood tapes. The latest details about what Mr. Trump said to Ukraine's president had not changed their minds. I'm like, yeah, boy who cried wolf, said Donna Burgraff. That's the Donna we're talking about. An associate education professor and registered independent, from Andersonville, Tennessee, who voted for Barack Obama in 2008 I don't even know whether anybody believes that, although apparently there are such people, before swinging to Mr. Trump. I guess that's why they think she's a swing voter. You've got to have something big, and I haven't seen something big. Donna Burgraff, I guess in the old interview, the previous one, is listed here as a registered independent in Chillicothe, in southern Ohio. Interestingly enough, I guess she moved. And she says she finds Mr. Trump boorish. I don't know whether I believe that. Anyway, we'll continue on with this in the previous excerpt next. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Yes, it's actually probably not all that important now that I'm thinking about it to necessarily read all the screen grabs. But keep in mind that those screen grabs are available and are offered up as proof that the people that are being discussed did in fact show up in previous articles, whether the New York Times or elsewhere, and did say things that would lead one to believe that they are perhaps less than entirely independent. By the way, interesting, I mean, people move or whatever, but there was that interesting fact that Donna Burgraff in the current iteration is from Andersonville, Tennessee, but in her previous iteration was from, and I got the pronunciation wrong, I'm sure, and I think I looked it up just to see what that is. So it's, I guess, Chillicothe would be the better pronunciation, but in Ohio. And they're not close to one another necessarily, but I guess, like I said, people move. And in the previous interview, she did claim again to have maybe, I don't know, voted for, did she say she voted for Obama in this one? Well, I guess I better look through this. She was annoyed and upset and found Mr. Trump boorish. She said that he judges women on their looks and seems to thrive on embarrassing people, behavior that Ms. Burgraff, an associate professor of education at Ohio University, disapproves of. So clearly, again, professor of education. I guess if you're an associate professor of education at Ohio University, it's entirely likely that you may have moved on for a better or tenured position in Tennessee. They're very mobile sometimes, professors. Ms. Burgraff did not like how Mr. Trump kept falsely asserting that Mr. Obama was not born in the United States. How could that have been anything but racism, she said. Still, on Election Day 2016, Ms. Burgraff voted for Mr. Trump, if reluctantly. She believed he was the better choice. That's dumb. And looking back, she does not regret it. That's dumb too. The tax bill has given her an extra $400 a month in her paycheck. That's highly doubtful. Highly doubtful. Professor's salary, especially one who's not happy enough to stay in her job at Ohio University as an associate professor and moves on to Tennessee. I doubt very much that she was getting $400 a month extra, but who knows? I pulled the lever for Trump, and I'm not sorry I did, she said over lunch in Chillicothe in March. She said she planned to vote this fall for her Republican Congressman, Brad Wenstrup, and that's a real name, apparently. It's alleged. Anyway, so no, not very swingy, but I guess the excuse they'll give is, well, they voted for Obama, or said they voted for Obama, and then they voted for Trump, and that's swingy. We're going to take that. Okay. Next up here is the New York Times article also includes an interview with Trisha, who admits she's been to 23 Trump campaign rallies. 23. She wrote a book about Trump. New York Times has interviewed her at least twice in the last 2 years. She's a Trump fanatic, not a swing voter. Let's see. She's mentioned in the current article saying, once again, that she's been to these 23 rallies, compiled a collection of Mr. Trump's tweets in a book. She didn't write a book. She collected his tweets in a book and put them together and said that was her book. Talked to the Copyright and Trademark Office about that one and why that might or might not work. Anyway, apparently she's been cited before, and the book's been mentioned before. Here in this second screen grab, it says here, the first volume of the president's tweets, a hardback 387-page book published by a realtor in nearby League City, was selling for $35. The book, Just the Tweets, has sold more than 4,000 copies since April. The second volume will be out in March. I mean, that's amazing all by itself. That's a story by itself. By the way, as soon as Donald Trump finds out about this, he's going to sue you for that money and much more. He wouldn't be president if he hadn't tweeted, said the publisher, Trisha Hope. Oh, I see. She's not only the author, compiler, the editor of the book, but the publisher as well, self-published. Okay, I guess I figured as much. But that's what she said. He wouldn't have been president if he hadn't tweeted, said the publisher Trisha Hope, as she stood at her booth next to the arena at a Trump rally. I don't know if the president has seen it. I gave one to Ted Cruz to give to the president. I'm hoping he does. Well, if he does, he'll sue you. Okay, that's another example. The New York Times article, Matt continues on in saying, also includes an interview with Reggie. Reggie was highlighted in an AP story last year entitled, In the Heart of Trump Country, His Base Remains Unshaken. Reggie has a portrait of Robert E. Lee hanging in his living room. No, Reggie is not a swing voter either. The New York Times is repeating its exact same 2016 reporting antics, presenting devout Trump supporters as some sort of forgotten swing constituency. Why does this keep happening, and why do they keep going back to the same individuals for interviews? It's almost like our own Russian troll factory over here, I would say. How frequently has this happened? Greg Pinello has not only guessed that the New York Times would do this swing voter on the street reporting, and he includes a link to Greg's tweet here, but correctly guessed exactly how many interviews they'd reference. Seriously, the embedded tweet here from Greg, I'm sure the media, New York Times, I'm looking at you, will find 6, that's right, 6 swing white guys, they're not all guys though, you got that wrong, in a diner somewhere who'll claim they were on the fence and impeachment made them decide to vote Trump. They're lying, they were with him all along, they were always going to be with him. Hit the nail on the head there with that one, and that's actually the end of that tweet thread. Again, can't tell you with accuracy the name of the reporter we were talking about anymore because the Twitter account is gone, but doubtless some of you have read the article in the series of articles and remember her very well. Okay, let's see. What to do with the rest of the time? Let's plunge back into Pocket for the time being and see what else I might have reminded myself of there. Greg asked me last night if I had possibly written this piece for the New Yorker. I have not, I don't think, ever before been accused of having written an Andy Borowitz piece, but I see what he's getting at, and I don't know whether it's not something to go forward with at this point. Definitely a love it or hate it thing with Borowitz columns, I find, for people. But funny headline anyway. He's good at that. Trump's lawyers argue that he cannot be impeached because he was never actually elected. That's a tactic I hadn't considered. I was in the middle of working on the one that says that he can't be impeached because he's dead. As you know, I believe he died the day they called Pence back and turned his plane around on the way to New Hampshire. And I still expect to be borne out as correct on that one. But, well, okay. It's an idea, and I just thought I would cite that one for you. And a fun one at that. Let's see. Other things I put aside yesterday as things were developing. I just want to make sure I haven't missed anything here, or whether there are any interesting details that I can give you as you are watching things develop in real time and reading things along the way. This is a point I discussed yesterday at some length, but I was glad to see the Washington Post pick up on this theme. This is Philip Bump's piece. The headline, Trump wanted Russia's main geopolitical adversary, and that's not us, it's actually Ukraine. This is what's happening in all this, what's basically at stake in all this, and why it's such a huge risk to America's interests around the world, our national security, and ought to be of concern to everyone. Trump wanted, at bottom, in making his deals, wanted Russia's main geopolitical adversary to help undermine the Russian interference story. So he's asking Ukraine, which is at war with Russia. Russia has invaded Ukrainian territory, annexed Ukrainian territory in the case of Crimea, and seeks to do the same and more in other provinces of Ukraine. Ukraine has every reason to be, flatly anti-Russia, anti-Russian. It's a very delicate situation. Of course, they're right next door. They used to be a former Soviet republic. There's a heavy ethnic Russian population. There's always been a lot of cross-pollination and close relations, for better or for worse, between Ukraine and Russia. But there's a hot war going on, which I tried to remind you when we were talking with Joan yesterday, actually did result in the shoot down of that Malaysia Airlines flight 17, I believe it was, en route to Kuala Lumpur, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. You see that in print all the time, but rarely get to say it out loud. But outbound out of Amsterdam with a number of Dutch citizens on board. And that got Dutch intelligence very interested in what the hell was going on in this part of Ukraine. But anyway, that was offered up just to remind people, yeah, that's a shooting war situation here. And Trump's idea of intervening in that situation as president of the United States is, I want to do something to threaten Ukraine's ability to fight for and assert its own independence and sovereignty in the middle of all this. Why? Remember, Ukraine is trying desperately to move westward, to integrate itself into the European community as a Western-style democracy, possibly even as a member state of NATO. And the president's answer, this current supposed president's answer to this is, I need to undermine your ability to maintain your independence from Russia. And I want to do what I can to freeze your ability to resist their invasion. That's amazing, all by itself. But only explainable when you think back to what Hillary Clinton told you about Donald Trump. He's going to be Putin's puppet. Who wants Ukraine to be unable to resist a military invasion from Russia? Russia. And who's running Russia? Putin. Who's normally worried about Russian expansion, especially into places that are trying to become westernized and democratized? The United States. But in this case, we're just not, for no particular reason. Right? Just coin toss. Also, by the way, when was the last time, I mentioned the other day, when was the last time you saw Donald Trump intervene to stop American arms sales abroad? Never. It's a huge point of pride for him. He loves to brag about that. I went to Saudi Arabia and they're making the biggest arms purchase. We're selling them, and we love this one and that one. And Saudi Arabia pays cash, but we're selling weapons to everybody. He's the proudest, more proud of that than anything else. But this one he stopped. Why? Because Putin doesn't want them to have bullets and guns. He wants to conquer them. And American presidents usually oppose that, but not this time, coincidentally. And now, in the middle of all this, he's asking the victims of Russia's military aggression to please help exonerate the Russians in the election interference story. That is pretty amazing all by itself. Maybe we can zip through a bit of this just to give you a flavor of how Philip Bump is reporting it. President Trump's conversation with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and we're dropping the second Y in a lot of the reporting here, anglicizing it, on July 25th began with Trump congratulating Zelensky on having won his election this year. Very quickly, though, Trump got down to business. I will say that we do a lot for Ukraine, Trump said, according to a rough transcript of the conversation released yesterday. We spend a lot of effort and a lot of time, much more than the European countries are doing. And they should be helping you more than they are. Trump criticized European countries such as Germany for not doing more. He just bad mouths Germany to them right away. The memo is actually pretty humorously clear about that. The United States has been very, very good to Ukraine. I wouldn't say that it's reciprocal necessarily, because things that are happening that are not good, but the United States has been very, very good to Ukraine. In other words, you owe us something. Zelensky agrees, and there are some articles circulating in the last day or so that help explain why. It was apparently made clear to the Ukrainian side of the call that a precondition for Trump agreeing to get on the phone with them at all. And remember, they're seeking out a conversation with Trump for the new president. One, because that's what a new head of state would likely do, establish some relations normally with the United States, because normally the United States is considered the leader of the free world, and the president of the United States is a serious person and can affect international affairs in a orderly fashion, or as a chaos agent. But you want to establish a relationship with the president. And I guess it's most important to establish one with this one because he thinks personal relationships are everything. But they obviously prepped him for the call by saying you need to flatter him at all costs, be over the top with it. By all means, go ahead. He doesn't like or get subtlety. And two, make mention of the fact that you've stayed at one of his properties, even if you haven't. But always agree with him. Tell him he has great ideas, whatever it is, because we need money. We need help. Why, again, do we need money and help? We discussed this before. The answer is because Russia. They're fighting a war with Russia. They need money to buy weapons and fight that war against Russia, and Trump is threatening to take it away. So apparently, I think Axios had reported, among others, but I think I don't know who was first or whatever, but I happened to see, finally, when it was written down and tweeted out, Axios' name attached to it. Don't know if it's their original reporting, but that reported that it was well known. It was explained clearly to the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainian officials surrounding President Zelensky clearly expressed the belief that it was a prerequisite to even get on the phone with Trump, that you would agree to do these things that he was asking, that you would agree to work with Giuliani, that you would agree to flatter him, that you would agree to look into this stupid conspiracy theory thing that nobody even knows what it is exactly, but just nod and pretend you do and say you'll definitely look into it, and then we'll get our money so that we can fight for our damned independence from Russia, whose puppet Trump is. So he might even go along with it. And I suspect they probably even thought that there was some chance that they would get duped and they would agree to all this stuff on the call and do all these things and still not get their money, because that's kind of the way he operates. Anyway, so there we are. You've read more about what went on during the call. You read about how sycophantically Zelensky had to approach things. And I guess it's also been reported that they're a little annoyed. They thought only the United States side of this stupid conversation would be printed. And I'm not certain whether they were embarrassed about the possibility of everybody finding out how much, bootlicking Zelensky was willing to do in order to get this money, which I guess for an anti-corruption candidate and a political outsider must have been extremely distasteful. And really, honestly, anybody licking Trump's boots is going to find it distasteful, but embarrassing as well. Although I did see that a lot of people, I guess they met at the UN yesterday as well, and had there was an opportunity for Zelensky to address the press, and I saw some people commenting that he sounds much better spoken. There's no way that his part of the conversation as portrayed in the memo was really him, and people began to suspect that maybe Trump or Trump's people drafted up a Zelensky side of the conversation that somehow magically began to sound an awful lot like Trump instead. We've heard that happening before too. All right. So Zelensky goes on basically and says, yes, whatever you want, but we need to buy these missile systems. We need the money. We need the support. That's, of course, when Trump says, sure, but we need you to do us a favor. From this point on, it is more or less, I don't think at this point we're going to reveal anything new by reading Bump's recounting of this. Not because he didn't do a good job or anything, but because events have caught up with him, and we've all read these things elsewhere. There's also, let's see, maybe we'll skip off to a different article here. I'm pretty sure I've put one away that helps explain or attempts to explain what the hell with the CrowdStrike thing. Where did that come from? Why is that included? And what exactly is it? Let's see. I have a piece here from Cyberscoop, which I'm not familiar with. Our writer's name is Shannon Vavra, V-A-V-R-A. But I did see this bandied about, and we'll see what we think about this as an explanation. Why did President Trump mention CrowdStrike to the Ukrainian president? That, I think, is still not entirely clear, even to the Ukrainian president, honestly, and I certainly don't think it was clear at the time. During a controversial phone call between the two, obviously, I'll eliminate those details, Trump asks Zelensky for a favor to help locate a, quote, server, because he might not even have the term right, linked with security company CrowdStrike, according to an unclassified transcript of the call released Wednesday. And I understand that at some point some of these materials were unclassified and then reclassified, though that may have been the whistleblower report. I'm not certain. But I think things have gone back and forth just to show you how arbitrary and capricious this whole classification system can sometimes be. And like I said earlier in the show, there are specific reasons why we worry about that. Anyway, a quote from the memo. I would like you to do us a favor, though, because our country has been through a lot, and Ukraine knows a lot about it. I would like you to find out what happened with this whole situation with Ukraine, which is an amazing statement. But he I guess tries to clarify later, but he's just so dumb and expresses himself so poorly. He's talking to the president of the Ukraine. I'm sorry, Ukraine. Did I say the Ukraine? Yes, I snuck that in there. He's talking to the president of Ukraine and tells him, I want you to find out what happened with this whole situation with Ukraine. Well, that's the charge of the president of Ukraine. He just can't specify what he's talking about, partly because he doesn't know what he's talking about, And probably partly because even if he did know what he was talking about, I think he might have some sense that if I lay out all the details in this call, I'm going to give away too much of the details of my criminal conspiracy. So he leans on the movie mafia boss thing, where he just sort of refers to people as our friend and this thing, and he thinks he can't incriminate himself that way, but that's not how it actually works. In reality, the court will invite the jury to interpret these things for themselves, but with guidance from the prosecution. We'll tell them how they ought to consider it. So anyway, I'd like you to do us a favor. I would like you to find out what happened with this whole situation with Ukraine. They say CrowdStrike, and now here an ellipsis, which is not a good thing in a transcript. They say CrowdStrike. I guess you have one of your wealthy people, I guess that's supposed to mean oligarch, the server, they say Ukraine has it. Trump said, according to the document released by the White House, I think you're surrounding yourself with some of the same people. I would like to have the U.S. Attorney, the Attorney General, William Barr, call you or your people, and I would like you to get to the bottom of it. They insert in brackets who he's talking about. I would like to have the Attorney General call you or your people, and I would like to have you get to the bottom of it. And they have, I'm sure, no clue what the hell he's talking about. Because I believe later in the conversation, he's like, yeah, maybe you could send me, Zelensky says, maybe you could send me some information about what the F you're talking about so that we can help understand the complaint. It appears that Trump asked Zelensky to search for a server linked with the 2016 breach of the DNC, an incident which California-based CrowdStrike helped to investigate. CrowdStrike famously attributed the breach to two Russian advanced persistent threats. Remember those APTs? Groups that they labeled, I think, Cozy Bear and Fancy Bear. They were APT, Advanced Persistent Threat 29 and 28, respectively. In a whistleblower complaint filed last month, a whistleblower alleges much of the same, according to an unclassified version of the complaint. That's the one we have available to read. Trump asked Zelensky to help in uncovering that allegations of Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election originated in Ukraine, with a specific request that the Ukrainian leader locate and turn over servers used by the DNC and examined by U.S. cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike, the whistleblower wrote. And I'm sure at this point Zelensky is like, what? I don't even know. I have no idea why you think Ukraine has these things. Well, Trump has long alleged a DNC server is missing, a theory which appears to be based on a conspiracy theory peddled in right-wing circles that CrowdStrike was involved in a cover-up of the DNC breach. But in reality, there are no physical machines linked with the DNC breach that are actually missing. Instead of one server, there were actually more than 140 servers decommissioned by the DNC in June of 2016, many of them cloud-based. This was done in an attempt to remove the Russians from DNC systems, according to filings from the DNC's civil lawsuit against Russia and Trump's campaign. The DNC also removed and replaced software, including the operating systems, for more than 180 computers and rebuilt 11 servers. It wasn't one server handling all of them. There were hundreds, as it turns out, and none of them are missing. It's just, I don't know. You just thought that sounded mysterious, so you said it. With regards to our investigation of the DNC hack in 2016, we provided all forensic evidence and analysis to the FBI, CrowdStrike said in a statement. As we've stated before, we stand by our findings and conclusions that have been fully supported by the U.S. intelligence community. This is complete nonsense, DNC Communications Director Xochitl Hinojosa said. Trump still hasn't accepted that Russia interfered in our election and instead is using a call with a foreign leader to push conspiracy theories. This is surreal. The theory was amplified, believe it or not, when Trump's advisor Roger Stone's legal team alleged the 2016 hack was an inside job and that CrowdStrike tampered with the evidence to pin the activity on Russian hackers. Again, more projection because, of course, we're watching right now the White House tampering with evidence to hide it. Stone's legal team used this argument to claim of the U.S. government's warrants, that the U.S. government's warrants in the case against him were invalid. So quite a stretch in that. Part of the theory alleges that CrowdStrike co-founder and CTO Dmitry Alperovich is Ukrainian. Well, he was in fact born in Russia and is a U.S. citizen. He's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, which receives funding from the Viktor Pinchuk Foundation. Here goes the conspiracy theory web here. A Pinchuk, a Ukrainian billionaire, has previously donated to the Clinton Foundation. Oh my God. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. Okay. Let's carry on here. I got a note, by the way, during the past segment from Greg, and he has sent on, let's see. Let's go and grab the information he put in our back channels here. Apparently, according to White House officials, this was not the first time under this administration that a presidential transcript was placed into the previously referenced code word level system solely for the purpose of protecting politically sensitive information. That's interesting all by itself. Although it doesn't absolutely necessarily confirm that this was activity of the same sort. There is politically sensitive information that might rise to the level of needing code word level classification. But the implication is, in this case, and I guess the implication here in this comment is that there are other similar cases where there was no legitimate national security risk other than embarrassment to the president or perhaps criminal liability for the president. Though, I guess I would expect that the Trump lawyers will come up with the theory that personal embarrassment or even criminal exposure for the president creates a national security problem all by itself, which is an interesting inversion of the actual national security problem. It's a national security risk when the president exposes himself to criminal liability, because if the criminal liability is not generally known, it may itself become blackmail material. Presidents won't want that material generally disseminated. If it is in the hands of a foreign enemy of some sort, they might be able to blackmail the president to, into certain actions against the interests of the United States in exchange for a promise not to reveal that information. What they may do is, I would anticipate the president's lawyers inverting that argument and saying, yeah, that's why criminal liability on behalf of the president is a national security risk. And because it's a national security risk, we classified it because it would be a risk if it got out. Well, that's not exactly what we mean here, but that's the sort of thing that will be, could easily be seized upon by the Trump-loving, MAGA hat-wearing weirdos out there and say, see, you guys, it's you people who don't understand what national security is all about. Just throw that theory out there for you. We'll probably see that one by the end of the day. Back to the cyber scoop story about why in the world did Trump bring up cyber strike in all of this. So, I guess again, to go back to our theory of the way Republicans operate and all this, going back to the germ of truth in all this, it's very distant. CrowdStrike was co-founded by an ethnic Ukrainian person, or somebody that the conspiracy theorists need you to believe is Ukrainian, though he was born in Russia. Now, he could be ethnically Ukrainian and born in Russia. This doesn't straighten it out. But if that's not enough for you, because Ukraine is a country, and the fact that a person is born in Ukraine or is ethnically Ukrainian but born in Russia does not mean that a server which isn't missing, that this person grows to adulthood and works with later in life, would be hidden in Ukraine. Like, what does that even mean, right? It's like, okay, well, let's say Ken Cuccinelli is ethnically Italian. If we were to theorize incorrectly that he had stolen thousands of dollars from the state of Virginia when he was Attorney General, and without bothering to establish that there were really, in fact, thousands or millions of dollars missing from the state coffers, we said we believe them to be hidden in Italy, and called the Italian prime minister and said, we need you to get to the bottom of this. We would, of course, say, God, that's insane. On what are you basing this? First of all, there's no money missing. Second of all, why would it be in Italy? And the answer is Ken Cuccinelli is an Italian-American. And you can't hide money stolen from America in America, but he's Italian, so he stole it and hid it in Italy, not Switzerland, not Cayman Islands, not Bahamas, Italy. I mean, all right, no, but whatever. Okay, so here's the guy, born in Russia. He's a U.S. citizen. He is, so maybe that's not enough for you to believe that it's in Ukraine, right? Well, he's also a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Yeah. And the Atlantic Council receives funding from Viktor Pinchuk. Yes. And Viktor Pinchuk is Ukrainian. Yes. And he's donated to the Clinton Foundation. Aha! Clinton. That's obviously what makes it all click. So a guy who co-founded CrowdStrike is maybe ethnically Ukrainian, but an American citizen. He's a senior fellow at some other place, the Atlantic Council. The council got money from Viktor Pinchuk. Pinchuk is Ukrainian and once gave money to the Clinton Foundation. That's literally what they've got. And as stupid as that is, supposedly the guy who purports to be president of the United States is calling other heads of state, and on this basis is telling him what he wants. I'm going to extort this from you, and you're not going to be able to fight for your sovereignty against Russia, which is a great benefit to Russia, and I might be able to trade for some favors with Putin later, i.e. money for myself. You're going to have to suffer. People are going to die in your country because I need you to investigate this theory. Amazing. So anyway, continuing on with the story, Trump indicated Wednesday that his personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, is examining the origins of the special counsel investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. He is not. He's simply, alleging things that he thinks undermine its legitimacy, but which don't. But because he lives in a world where it makes sense that because Viktor Pinchuk once gave money to the Clinton Foundation and is Ukrainian, this whole thing makes sense, and that a server was spirited out of the United States and is being hidden in Ukraine as a result. Because the guy works at a place, that got funded once by another Ukrainian guy. That's how much sense this makes. People are going to die because of this. Anyway, that reminds me also, by the way, of how improper it is that we found out in the whistleblower report, not only that Rudy Giuliani, who has no place in all of this, has been inserted into the process, but that he is going to be calling in tandem, in cooperation with somebody who has official duties to the United States. Bill Barr, the Attorney General in all this, is going to mix his time with the private lawyer Giuliani. That's improper all by itself. Anyway, Rudy Giuliani, the Cyber Scoop story continues, by quoting Trump speaking to reporters on the sidelines at the UN here. Rudy is also looking, and they have to clean up his speech here with brackets, at that Russian witch hunt. So Rudy is also looking Russian witch hunt. That turned out to be phony nonsense. Where did this Russian witch hunt start? There's an ellipsis. Where did this Russian witch hunt, ellipsis, start? Trump said to reporters on the sidelines at the UN General Assembly meeting during a joint press availability with Zelensky in New York. It was all nonsense. It was a total hoax. It was out of thin air, he alleged. When Trump has referred to a Russian witch hunt and a hoax in the past, he's been referring to accusations that he was involved with or behind Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. In mentioning a server, it is unclear if Trump was referring to Hillary Clinton's private email server, a question that he has raised before. He has previously tweeted, "Where's the DNC server, and why didn't the FBI take possession of it? Deep state?" So it's likely that he doesn't even know what server he's talking about. Hillary Clinton's private email server would, of course, be something entirely different from the DNC servers. Neither of the two are missing, I don't believe. Trump said Wednesday he thought it is possible that Clinton's emails, the 30,000 missing emails, Russia, if you're listening, he thought it was possible that Clinton's emails were in Ukraine. Roger Stone, has been indicted for making false statements before congressional committees and has a history of spreading conspiracy theories online. This is not the first time Trump has brought up the missing server conspiracy theory. He raised similar questions during his press conference with Russian President Vladimir Putin in July last year. Stop trying to separate the two. And here's the quote from last year. You have groups that are wondering why the FBI never took the server, which isn't missing. Trump said last year, why didn't they take the server? What server? Just a server. I heard the word server in there somewhere. Where is the server? I want to know. And what is the server saying? Nothing. It's a server. The release of the Trump-Zelensky call comes as House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has opened an impeachment inquiry into Trump. The White House did not immediately return requests for comment. So there you have it. That's supposed to be the explanation for why the server issue, which isn't an issue, came up, why CrowdStrike got mentioned, which makes no sense. Just wanted to sort of give you a sense of how removed from reality all of this is. And once again, how closely tied Ukraine and Russia really are in all of this. And, by the way, also during the press availability, I don't even know what to make of this one, but it did raise some eyebrows. Trump announced to the press that, as far as he's concerned, Nancy Pelosi isn't the Speaker of the House. I was just reminded about that at the last paragraph here, that it comes as House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has opened an impeachment inquiry. No, she didn't, because she's not Speaker of the House anymore. She's out. I fired her. I'm going to replace her with an acting Speaker of the House instead. Not a thing you can do. So let's just leave that out of it. But, he's not the first to speculate in such a manner. I've speculated, for instance, that he's not the president. But no one seems to want to listen to that one. That a weird utterance, though, is apparently going nowhere, although who knows what we'll learn in the coming days that'll make us worry that either he's completely detached from reality or thinks that Speaker of the House is someone he can replace, or that he can somehow ignore her role in all of this stuff. I have no idea. All right. Let's see. Back into Pocket, back into the Twitter feed to try and figure out what else we might add to help fill out this picture. I had mentioned yesterday that there were this is, I guess, another aspect of the whistleblower report and of the transcript, the non-transcript of the call. There's some mention of maybe at this point, let me roll back to the now released memo, but not transcript, of the call to try and find this part about where Trump is bad-mouthing the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine as well. So let's see. We got to skip through the pleasantries at the beginning of the conversation. We've heard mostly about those things. Here's the part where he badmouths Germany, by the way. Trump saying, I will say that we do a lot for Ukraine. We spend a lot of effort and a lot of time. He's trying not to say money, I guess. Much more than the European countries are doing. And they should be helping you more than they are. Germany does almost nothing for you. All they do is talk, and I think it's something that you should really ask them about. When I was speaking to Angela Merkel, she talks Ukraine, but she doesn't do anything. A lot of the European countries are the same way. So I think it's something you want to look at. But the United States has been very, very good to Ukraine. I wouldn't say that it's reciprocal necessarily, because things are happening that are not good. But the United States has been very, very good to Ukraine. And Zelensky is forced to agree and flatter him and butter him up. And I agree with you, not only 100%, but 1,000%. He agrees. I also talked to Merkel and Macron, and I told them they're not doing as much as needed to be done. This is interesting. I told them that they're not doing as much as they need to be doing on the issues with the sanctions, which isn't actually agreeing with Trump, that they're not doing as much contributing money. I don't know whether they're giving money to Ukraine for defense or not. But his discussion was about their sanctions against Russia, which, I guess Ukraine lobbies for with other countries, in addition to asking for money for military equipment. Let's see. So then he goes on and says, I'd also like to thank you for your support in the area of defense. It says he wants to buy more of the Javelin missiles, to which the president responds, I'd like you to do us a favor, though, because our country has been through a lot. Blah, 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 and then into the server and the CrowdStrike allegations, which he doesn't even bother to make. All he says to Zelensky is, I'd like you to do us a favor, though, blah, blah, blah. I would like you to find out what happened with this whole situation in Ukraine. They say CrowdStrike. I guess you have one of your wealthy people. The server, they say Ukraine has it. There are a lot of things that went on, the whole situation. I think you're surrounding yourself with some of the same people. I would like to have the Attorney General call you or your people, and I would like to get to the bottom of it. As you saw, and then he goes on to criticize Mueller. As you saw yesterday, that whole nonsense ended with a very poor performance by a man named Robert Mueller, an incompetent performance. But they say a lot of it started with Ukraine. Whatever you can do, it's very important that you do it, if that's possible. And I guess that's in Trump's mind, that's the hedge. If that's possible. That's me saying don't do it if it's illegal. I would never ask him to do that. But if it isn't, and it's therefore possible, I would ask that you do it. Do what? He doesn't even make, and maybe that'll be his defense. I don't make an ask. I'm too incoherent to make an ask. But it's amazing how muddled this part of it is. And Zelensky not knowing what to say, he says, yes, it is very important for me, and everything that you just mentioned earlier. For me, as a president, it is very important, and we are open for any future cooperation. We are ready to open a new page on cooperation and relations between the United States and Ukraine. For that purpose, I just recalled our ambassador from the United States, and he will be replaced by a very competent and experienced ambassador who will work hard on making sure that our two nations are getting closer. I would also like and hope to see him having your trust and your confidence and have personal relations with you, whatever that means, so we can cooperate even more so. I will personally tell you that one of my assistants spoke with Mr. Giuliani just recently. How did that happen? And we are hoping very much that Mr. Giuliani will be able to travel to Ukraine, and we will meet once he comes to Ukraine. I just want to assure you once again that you've nobody but friends around us. I will make sure that I surround myself with the best and most experienced people. I want to tell you that we are friends. We are great friends. And you, Mr. President, have friends in our country so we can continue our strategic partnership. I also plan to surround myself with great people, and in addition to that investigation, I guarantee you that as President of the Ukraine, that all the investigations will be done openly and candidly. That I can assure you. Now, our president responds, good, because I heard you had a prosecutor who was very good and he was shut down, and that's really unfair. A lot of people are talking about that. Is that the tell or what? A lot of people are talking about that. No one is. The way they shut down your very good prosecutor down, and you had some very bad people involved. Mr. Giuliani is a highly respected man. He was the mayor of New York City, a great mayor, and I would like him to call you. I would ask him to call you along with the Attorney General, which is improper all by itself. Rudy very much knows what's happening, and he's a very capable guy. He's not. If you would speak to him, that would be great. Now, he goes on. Now, that's by itself is all very troubling stuff. And what's weird here is now reference to the prosecutor. There were two prosecutors that it was possible he was talking about. The immediate predecessor, who I think his name was Luchenko. Was that his name? But there was also a previous prosecutor who was the one. It wasn't the immediately previous prosecutor who Biden was even carrying forward the international message on with respect to getting the guy ousted. It was an international message, as I mentioned yesterday, and I can't remember, but this was the original prosecutor was, I can't remember his name, but it began with an S, is all I can remember. And he was replaced by Luchenko. Luchenko was eventually replaced as well, but the first guy was actually dismissed. And I was reading this, and it was also pointed out there were a couple of people commenting on this portion of the transcript, the non-transcript, and saying it's not clear even which prosecutor he's talking about. But if he's talking about the one, if he thinks he's talking about the one that Biden pushed to have fired, that's not Luchenko. And there was no investigation by either of them, as far as I know, into the Bidens. But it's Trump's impression, because he heard the story on television from Giuliani, that the reason that the prosecutor, either one of them, were pushed out, but originally the first one, the one with the S name, that's the best I can give you at the moment. Too many names flying around in order for me to be able to recall it specifically. But it was him that the conspiracy theory was invented. The germ of truth yesterday was that, yes, the international community wanted him out because he wouldn't prosecute corruption, and they invented a Biden-focused reason for Biden asking to do that. Now, at this point, Trump takes up the issue of the ambassador of the United States to Ukraine and says, the former ambassador from the United States, the woman, he can't remember names either, was bad news. And the people she was dealing with in Ukraine were bad news. So I just wanted to let you know that. The other thing, there's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution. And a lot of people want to find out. Again, a lot of people want to find out about that. So whatever you can do with the Attorney General would be great. Biden went around bragging that he stopped the prosecution. So if you can look into it, it sounds horrible to me. And Zelensky answers, I wanted to tell you about the prosecutor. First of all, I understand and I'm knowledgeable about the situation. Since we have won the absolute majority in our parliament, the next prosecutor general will be 100% my person, my candidate, who will be approved by the parliament and will start as a new prosecutor in September. He or she will look into the situation, specifically the company that you mentioned in this issue. The issue of the investigation of the case is actually the issue of making sure to restore the honesty. So we will take care of that and we will work on the investigation of the case. On top of that, I would kindly ask you if you have any additional information that you can provide us. It would be very helpful for the investigation to make sure that we administer justice in our country. With regard to the ambassador of the United States from Ukraine, as far as I recall, her name was Ivanovich. It was great that you were the first one who told me she was a bad ambassador, because I agree with you 100%. Her attitude toward me was far from the best, as she admired the previous president and was on his side. she would not accept me as the new president. Well enough. Interesting. Not certain whether there was actually any tension between the two of them or not, or whether he's just continuing to butter up Trump on all of this. But imagine that, the president calling and saying, yeah, our ambassador was terrible. She's bad. She's bad. I mean, it's just really, dangerous territory for a president of any kind to be in. But of course, with him already mixed up in all of the rest of this, it's only that much worse. So I mentioned that there was problem with ambassadors, our ambassador, or that Trump was creating a problem for her. Let me grab this real quick in our closing minutes. This is from HuffPost. Akbar Shahid Ahmed reporting on this angle here. Trump threatened an American serving her country as he pressured Ukraine. It's absolutely chilling to our diplomats, a former State Department official told HuffPost. Trump threatened a serving State Department official during a July 25th phone call with Zelensky that's now at the center of congressional investigations. And speaking of Yovanovitch, it's Yovanovitch, not Ivanovich, but he says of her later in the transcript, non-transcript, she's going to go through some things, which I don't know if that's like garbled English or time for traffic problems in Fort Lee or what. But they view it as a threat. She's going to go through some things, Trump said of Marie Yovanovitch, a veteran Foreign Service officer who served as the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine until May of this year. She departed from her post months earlier than expected after conservative media outlets, seeing dumb stuff on TV, and Donald Trump Jr., who should have nothing to do with this, accused her of being part of an alleged Ukrainian attempt to support Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign, which, by the way, for the record, is over. The statement, made after Trump referred to the woman as bad news, is a striking example of the president's willingness to throw members of his own government and citizens of his own country under the bus, particularly when he appears to believe that will benefit him personally. Presidents are conventionally expected to conduct themselves as the ultimate representatives of the United States, especially in dealing with foreign dignitaries, to protect officials with far less power and avoid the appearance of a fractured government apparatus that outsiders can exploit for their own ends. The revelation that Trump spoke of punishing Yovanovitch, whom Zelensky was quick to say he didn't support because the president told him she was a bad ambassador, will likely disturb many of the tens of thousands of career professionals working to serve his administration. The effect will be particularly strong at the State Department, which has suffered a serious collapse in morale as Trump has repeatedly proposed slashing its budget and failed to fill its top jobs. What's horrifying is Trump's implication that having recalled Ambassador Yovanovitch from post, he also intended to impose some kind of consequences on her for his displeasure at her failure to push his personal, not policy, agenda. Tamara Kaufman Witties, I guess, a former State Department official now at the Brookings Institution, told HuffPost, "It's absolutely chilling to our diplomats serving around the world, a message that their careers are on the line if they don't go along with abusive, unethical, or illegal demands from this administration," which is how you get people willing to hide things on the various White House servers, I guess. Yovanovitch is still employed by the State Department and currently holds a fellowship at Georgetown University. She did not respond to a request for comment. Officials dealing with Ukraine have already, for months, been disturbed by the way their official work has been mixed with the president's political ambitions, the Washington Post reported Tuesday. Trump is now implicated, of course, in an explicit attempt to pressure Zelensky to find damaging information on Joe Biden. We know all about that. The summary of the call suggests Trump was angry at Yovanovitch on the basis of claims made by a Ukrainian prosecutor named Yuri Lutsenko. There we are. In March, Lutsenko promised to investigate the Trump team's claims that Ukraine interfered in the 2016 U.S. election. But Lutsenko suggested the ambassador was tampering with his work and had given him a list of people not to prosecute. Trump's own State Department denied that charge, but the president appears to have bought it because it was said on TV. Rudy Giuliani, the president's personal lawyer, has been central to Trump's attempts to strike political gold in Ukraine, had a personal fixation on Yovanovitch, per the Post. She is now working for Soros, the attorney told the outlet, baselessly invoking right-wing conspiracy theories about Democratic donor George Soros. Giuliani had criticized the State Department apparatus and appears to have been trying to control U.S.-Ukraine relations himself on a separate track, regularly giving Trump updates about his activities in the country. That's the basis of things there. I don't have time to finish up the entirety of the article. There's only a little bit left to it. But there's another angle on it, which we can possibly discuss tomorrow, about the other ambassadors that Giuliani tried to pull into his scheme in replacing Yovanovitch once she was recalled from the country. So there's a lot more to it even than this. And even our narrow focus impeachment investigation may not get to the entirety of the Ukraine situation. Speaking of not getting to the entirety of the situation, time now to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Other subjects today. Oracle, the company, says congressional and state investigators have asked it for information about Google. California and 16 other states sued the Trump administration over weakened protection for endangered species, and the Senate voted to terminate Trump's national emergency for his border wall, again in the middle of all this, just yesterday.